Hey friends, the holidays are quickly approaching and the requests from you for Christmassy watercolor projects are flying in. So today I'll teach you how to paint this beautiful holiday-inspired piece. It's easier than you'd think. This is perfect for holiday cards, or I'm actually going to frame it and put it on my mantelpiece to go along with my Christmas decor. So let's dive in. For supplies today, I have a 5 by 7 inch piece of Arches watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton, 140-pound cold press. And you can see that I have a sketch on here of what I'm going to paint. And I do have a free link to this sketch in the description below in case you would like to use it as well. For paint colors, you'll want at least one shade of red. I have two here. I have alizarin crimson for the poinsettia leaves, and I have cadmium red that I plan to use for these little like holly berry leaves. And you'll also want a few shades of green. So I have hooker's green mixed with indigo, sap green mixed with indigo, sap green, and olive green. I'm also going to use a little bit of burnt umber for the pine tree branch areas, and probably some indigo as well as I get in around these centers. For the flower centers, you can use a yellow like yellow ochre. I'm also planning to use some of this drawing ink. This is gold drawing ink by Winsor & Newton. You could also use gold metallic watercolor, gold acrylic, if you have acrylic markers or gel pens, whatever you'd like. Christmas is a sparkly time, so now is the time to bust out those watercolor metallics and inks. For brushes, today I'm going to be using a size 2 quill brush by Meeden. This is equivalent to maybe like a size 6 round. And I'm planning to use this for my poinsettia leaves and probably even filling in these holly leaves as well. But I did grab a size 1 liner brush for the pine needles. And I also really love this size 0 round brush by Transon. It's a nice little detail brush. I'm going to use this to paint veins on my leaves and just for those really tiny areas. You may also want some white gouache. I'm using this and mixing a little green with it to add on some veins on some of these leaves because I want some of the veins to be lighter than the base leaf color. So white gouache is going to help me achieve that look. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to lighten up these pencil marks. So I'm going to use my kneadable eraser. And I'm just going to roll it across these pencil marks to pull some of that graphite off so that it doesn't show through as easily under my painting. For today's painting especially, these pencil marks really are just for a point of reference. They are not something that we need to follow exactly. It's just to kind of see where we're going to place all of the different things in the painting. I'm still planning on painting, especially like these poinsettias, pretty loosely on top of those pencil lines. So since I'm quite certain I'm going to go outside of the pencil lines, I want to make sure I get them a little bit lighter. Let's get started. I've got my size 2 quill brush and I'm getting it wet here in my water. And the first thing I'm going to paint is this big poinsettia right here. So I'm going into my alizarin crimson. All right, let's go in, starting at the flower center, and I'm just going to push out, kind of let my brush strokes follow my pencil lines. So there's my first layer of poinsettia leaves, and I like the look of them overlapping a little bit. If you do not like that look, you can simply paint just the bottom leaves here, but I'm going to dry this and then paint these on top. So actually these leaves that are drawn in underneath are actually going to appear a little bit more on top. And you can see here that I have some variation of color. This is just due to the pressure I was applying on my brush and the way that the water was spreading. I personally like this look because I'm trying to keep this a little bit more of a loose style. If this happens to you and you don't like it, you can simply paint over it again and even out that wash. Now that these petals are dry, I'm going to paint my next 5 petals on top of those. Now this is the only tricky part here because I have this poinsettia that's going to layer on top. So I'm going to paint around this one. Because watercolor is transparent, if I wanted to layer this on top of this, it would show through. And I just want to avoid that for today's painting. So I'm painting around those pencil lines so that this poinsettia will still look like it's on top of this one. Next, I'm going to move in and do these poinsettia leaves. I am going to have some paint touching here, so I'm going to do this leaf last. And this poinsettia is a little bit smaller than this one, so it's going to require smaller brush strokes. Okay, now I'm going to dry these leaves. Now I'm going to paint my second layer on top. So now these red poinsettia leaves are done. Now while those are drying, let's do our pine branches. I'm going to bring over some burnt umber to my palette. So I'm switching over to my size 1 liner brush. You could use any kind of detail brush that you want, and we're going to paint these branches with the burnt umber or any brown of your choice. There's one peeking out over here too. Then we'll get these ones down here. Now we're just going to layer on a few shades of green with pine needles. All right, I'm going to layer 2 greens on here. I think I'm going to start with olive green and then layer in my sap green indigo mix on top of that. We'll see how that looks. I've got my liner brush wet. I'm going into the olive green. I'm just making these light little wispy movements. And I'm trying to be careful not to go on top of this holly leaf here. And you want to kind of change directions of your pine needles to make them look more natural. So that's going to be my first layer. Grab some more olive green and do these ones down here. It's a little bit trickier because I have this poinsettia leaf and this holly leaf over here. I'm just trying to be really quick with my brush strokes and a little bit random to help it look less calculated and more natural. I really love the way that looks. All right, we're going to go in now with our sap green indigo mix and layer on some pine needles again and see if we can get a little more depth and texture going on there with the 2 different colors. This is just so fun, painting pine needles. Just bouncing your brush along the page. I really love the way that that looks so much. All right, let's do this one. Let's go in now and paint our poinsettia green leaves. I'm switching back over to my size 2 quill brush and I'm going to be painting these leaves sap green and indigo. I'm not going to be painting these leaves as loosely as the petals. I really kind of want to follow these pencil lines. It's difficult for me, at least, to paint loose when I'm painting behind something else, because my brush strokes tend to get a little carried away and then I overlap in areas where I didn't want to. So I'm just going to follow the outlines of these red leaves and kind of the outlines that I drew in with my pencil for the leaves. If you want to add more shadow and depth to your leaves while they're still wet, you can take a darker value of your green mix and just dab it in along where they meet the red petals. Because since those leaves are tucked underneath, there's going to be more shadow where those red leaves meet the green ones. So this green that I'm dropping in now just has a little bit more indigo in it. Our green poinsettia leaves are done. So while those are drying, let's go ahead and start adding in our veins on our red poinsettia leaves. I'm going to use my size 0 round brush for this. You could also use your liner brush. So I'm going into my alizarin crimson. And I'm just going to paint in the veins on these leaves here. A good trick for these veins is to try not to make them straight. Giving your lines a little curve helps them look a little bit more natural. The veins in our red leaves are done, so let's move on now and paint the holly leaves. I'm going to use my Hooker's Green and Indigo mix for these leaves, and I might throw in a little bit of sap green to brighten that up as well. We'll see how it looks. I'm going to try throwing in a little bit of sap green in some spots. Just to kind of brighten this up a little bit. And I'm going to lift a little bit of paint from the middle. Throwing in some sap green. I'm going to drop in a little bit of darker mix here because it's underneath this leaf, so there's a little bit of a shadow there. Drop in some sap green. Again, this holly leaf is under a poinsettia leaf, so I'm going to take a little bit of a darker value of that indigo Hooker's Green mix and dab it in right along this leaf line. Now I'm going to grab some more sap green. Okay, I'm going to take my size 0 round brush and let's paint these little holly berries. I'm going to use cadmium red for these because it's a little bit of a brighter, warmer red than this alizarin crimson. And as I'm doing it, I'm going to be sure to leave a little tiny white spot for a highlight. This size 0 brush is just so tiny, it's taking me forever. So I might switch up to a little bit of a larger brush. We'll see. Now I just accidentally filled in my highlight, so I'm just going to make my berry a little bit bigger so that I can add a new one in on the top there. Now I'm going to take some burnt umber and draw in these branches here. Now that our poinsettia green leaves are dry, I'm going to go in and add in those vein details. So for this, I have sap green mixed with white gouache, because in a lot of these green poinsettia leaves, the veins are lighter color than the leaves. So to get a lighter color on top of a darker color with watercolor, we often need to use a different medium. So that's why I have brought the white gouache in and mixed a little sap green in it to make this really bright green. Just added a little more white gouache to my mix there because it was not showing up. And even with the gouache, these veins are kind of fading into the background, so I'm trying to go over them again. Just to brighten them up a little bit. Now this just seems too bright to me. Now, holly leaves also seem to have lighter veins, so we can just use the same sap green white gouache mix and add our veins to our holly leaves this way as well. I'm just going to go over some areas again with a little more gouache. All right, we're on to the final touches. So I'm going to put in a little bit of indigo around the centers here of these flowers and then top that off with some gold. Now I've got my Winsor Newton gold drawing ink, and I'm going to draw some gold veins on top of these red poinsettia leaves, put some gold in the center, and then I think we'll finish this off maybe with a little bit of splatter. So I'm just going every other leaf here. Let's dab some gold here in the center. All right, let's finish this off with some splatter. I'm going to splatter a little bit of very light value of red, some green, and then some gold. Okay, so here's some red. Now I'll grab some green, mixing up with a lot of water just to keep it really light. And lastly, I'm going to splatter a little bit of gold. And now our piece is finished. I hope you had as much fun painting this one as I did. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.